My name is Daisy. I'm 28 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I understood what family meant. I've always been the responsible one, the achiever, the good daughter who made my parents proud. My younger sister Megan was different, though, always getting into trouble and always getting bailed out. I never imagined my parents would threaten to cut me off completely unless I paid my sister's massive debt. That ultimatum changed everything I thought I knew about family loyalty and standing up for myself. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from, hit that subscribe button, and stay with me as I share how I called my parents' bluff and what happened next. I grew up in a middle-class suburb of Boston, with what I thought was a fairly normal family. My father, James, is a successful attorney with his own practice specializing in corporate law. He's always been stern practical and extremely focused on appearances. My mother, Catherine, worked as a school principal until her recent retirement. She's more emotional than my father, but just as concerned with what others think of our family. Then there's my younger sister, Megan. She's 24 now, 4 years younger than me, and has always been the apple of my parents' eyes. She has this naturally charismatic personality. She's beautiful, social, and somehow always gets what she wants. Growing up, I noticed the difference in how we were treated, but I tried to convince myself it was just because she was younger, or because I was more independent. The pattern was clear from early on, though. When I forgot a homework assignment in 6th grade, I was grounded for a week and lectured about responsibility. When Megan regularly skipped assignments, my parents would call the school and make excuses for her. I once overheard my mother telling a teacher that Megan was just too creative for structured assignments and needed special accommodation for her unique way of thinking. This pattern continued throughout our childhood. I worked hard, made honor roll, joined academic clubs, and tried to make my parents proud. They acknowledged my achievements, sure, but it was always with this underlying expectation that, of course, I would succeed. It was never celebrated the way Megan's smallest accomplishments were. When it came time for college, I applied for scholarships, took out modest student loans, and worked part-time jobs to pay for my education. I majored in finance at Boston University and graduated with honors. My parents contributed some, but always made it clear that I needed to be responsible for my future. They attended my graduation, but left early because Megan, who was still in high school, had a dance recital that same day. Meanwhile, when Megan went to college 2 years after me, my parents paid for everything, apartment included. She attended an expensive private university despite her mediocre grades, changed her major 3 times, and took 5 years to graduate with a communications degree. During those years, whenever she called home needing extra money for spring break trips or to cover bills she'd forgotten to pay, my parents always came through. By age 28, I had established myself as a financial analyst at a respected firm in downtown Boston. Last year, I received a significant promotion to senior analyst, which came with a comfortable salary increase. I was finally able to purchase my first condo, a modest but nice one-bedroom in a good neighborhood. I was proud of this achievement, especially since I'd saved for the down payment while still paying off my student loans. My parents seemed proud too, though my father's first comment was, "Well, it's a starter place, but you'll upgrade once you're married." My mother added, "The kitchen is awfully small, but I suppose it's fine since you're just one person." Still, I invited them over for dinner to celebrate, and they seemed impressed with how I'd furnished it on a budget. Throughout all these years, there were countless small instances where my parents' manipulation tactics became clear, though I didn't always recognize them as such at the time. If I couldn't attend a family function due to work, I'd receive passive-aggressive texts about family priorities. If I expressed an opinion that differed from theirs, especially regarding how they treated Megan, I'd be accused of jealousy or not understanding how families work. There were also many times when I was expected to make sacrifices for Megan. I gave up my bedroom when she wanted to convert it to an art studio during a summer home from college. I lent her my car when she crashed hers, only to have it returned with dents and empty of gas. I even helped her study for certification exams when she briefly considered becoming a real estate agent, a career she abandoned after 2 months. Despite recognizing these patterns, I still craved my parents' approval. I still wanted to be the good daughter, to make them proud, to feel like I truly belonged in this family. I told myself that every family has its issues, and that ultimately blood is thicker than water. That belief would soon be tested in ways I never imagined. The trouble really began when Megan graduated from college. Despite her communications degree from a prestigious university and our parents' connections, she struggled to find stable employment. She'd get jobs at marketing firms or media companies, but would quit after a few months always with a different excuse. The boss was toxic, they didn't appreciate my creative ideas, or the commute was killing me. Between jobs, Megan developed expensive habits. She'd always been somewhat spoiled, but now she was living completely beyond her means. Designer clothes, weekend trips, fancy restaurants, all documented meticulously on her Instagram, where she portrayed herself as a successful young professional. In reality, she was racking up credit card debt at an alarming rate. My parents helped her numerous times. They paid off one credit card that had reached $15,000. They covered 3 months of rent when she quit a job without having another lined up. They even co-signed for a new car when her old one died, despite my gentle suggestion that perhaps something more economical would be appropriate given her financial situation. I helped too, in smaller ways. When she called me crying about an overdue electric bill, I sent her $400. When she needed business clothes for a new job interview, I took her shopping and spent $600 on professional outfits. I wanted to be a good sister, and I genuinely hoped each time that this would be the turning point where Megan would start to become more responsible. That hope was fading by the time I received an unusually formal invitation to Sunday dinner at my parents' house 3 months ago. The text from my mother read, "Your father and I would like you to join us for dinner this Sunday at 6 p.m. Megan will be there. We have an important family matter to discuss." The formality of it immediately put me on edge. Usually family dinner invitations were casual. "Coming over Sunday, I'm making lasagna." When I arrived at my parents' suburban home that Sunday, I noticed my father's new luxury SUV in the driveway, a purchase he'd made just a month earlier. Inside, my mother was wearing a new designer watch I complimented, and she mentioned it was an anniversary gift. These details stood out to me later after what transpired that evening. The initial conversation over dinner was pleasant enough, though there was an undercurrent of tension. We discussed my recent work project and my mother's garden club drama. Megan was unusually quiet, picking at her food and checking her phone under the table. It wasn't until my father cleared his throat after dessert that the real reason for the dinner emerged. "Daisy, we need to discuss a serious family matter." He began using his lawyer voice. "Your sister has found herself in a difficult financial situation, and as a family, we need to address it together." My mother jumped in. "Megan has had some challenges with managing her finances, and things have gotten a bit out of hand." "A bit?" Megan suddenly spoke up, her voice cracking. "Mom, just tell her. I'm completely screwed unless you guys help me." The full picture slowly emerged through a painful conversation. Megan had amassed over $45,000 in debt. This included maxed out credit cards, a personal loan with a predatory interest rate, unpaid rent, and even money borrowed from friends. She was being threatened with eviction, her car was at risk of repossession, and creditors were calling daily. "We've helped Megan as much as we can," my father explained, though I noticed he avoided eye contact. "But with the renovations on the house last year and our retirement planning, we simply don't have the liquidity right now to handle this." My mother added, "This affects all of us, Daisy. If Megan gets evicted or has to declare bankruptcy, it reflects on the whole family. Your father's reputation in the legal community, my standing with former colleagues, it all matters." I sat there stunned, already sensing where this conversation was heading, but hoping I was wrong. I wasn't. "We think," my father continued his tone, making it clear this wasn't a suggestion, "that since you're doing well financially with your new promotion, you could help pay off Megan's debts. It's the sensible family solution." My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, sweetheart. Family helps family." Then came the ultimatum that would change everything. My father leaned forward, his expression deadly serious. "Daisy, we need you to step up here. If you can't help your sister, your own blood, when she's in trouble, then perhaps you don't understand what family means. And if that's the case, maybe you don't need to be part of this family anymore." The words hung in the air like a physical threat. My mother didn't contradict him, just looked at me with expectation. Megan had the decency to look somewhat uncomfortable, but then she added, "I'll pay you back someday, Deus, I promise. I'm just in a rough spot right now." I sat there in complete shock, trying to process what was happening. My own parents were threatening to disown me if I didn't hand over my hard-earned savings to bail out my sister once again. $45,000, almost all of my emergency fund, and the money I'd been saving for home improvements. And Megan sat there wearing a top I recognized as a $300 brand, showing no real remorse or understanding of the position she'd put everyone in. "I need some time to think about this," I finally said, my voice barely a whisper. I couldn't trust myself to say more without breaking down or saying things I might regret. "What's there to think about?" my father replied, clearly annoyed. "You make good money. Your sister needs help. We've done everything for you your whole life, and now we're asking you to give back to the family." I stood up, legs shaking. "I'll let you know my decision by the end of the week," I said, gathering my purse and keys. As I left, I heard my mother call after me about being overdramatic, and my father muttering something about always making things difficult. Megan remained silent, staring at her phone. The drive home from my parents' house was a blur. About halfway there, I had to pull over into a pharmacy parking lot because I couldn't see through my tears. I sat there for almost an hour sobbing and trying to process what had just happened. The family I thought would always be my safety net had just threatened to cut me off completely, unless I emptied my savings account to fix my sister's mistakes. As I sat in my car, memories from throughout my life started flooding back, instances of unfair treatment and favoritism that I had always downplayed or excused. The time my parents missed my high school debate championship because Megan had a cold. The Christmas when Megan received a car while I got a sweater and gift card. The constant expectation that I would be the bigger person, the responsible one, the one who would understand when plans changed to accommodate Megan's latest crisis or opportunity. When I finally got home to my condo, I made myself a cup of tea with shaking hands and took a hard look at my financial situation. On paper, I was doing well. My promotion had come with a significant salary increase, and I had been diligent about saving. But I was still paying off the last $15,000 in student loans. My mortgage was new, and while I had carefully calculated what I could afford, it wasn't a trivial expense. I had about $50,000 in savings, which represented years of careful budgeting and sacrifices. Taking $45,000 from that fund would leave me with almost nothing to fall back on if I had a medical emergency or lost my job. It would mean delaying my planned kitchen renovation indefinitely. It would mean years of hard work and responsible financial planning wiped out in an instant to enable my sister's continued irresponsible behavior. I called my best friend Taylor, who had known my family dynamics for years. Her response was immediate and emphatic. "They did what?" she practically shouted through the phone. "Daisy, that's not love, that's emotional blackmail. You can't give her that money. You know she'll never pay it back, and your parents will just expect you to bail her out again next time." "But they're my family," I said weakly. "What if they really do cut me off?" "Then they're showing you who they really are," Taylor responded. "And I know it hurts like hell, but maybe it's better to know now rather than spending the rest of your life being manipulated and drained. Real family doesn't threaten to disown you when you don't hand over your savings." I barely slept that night. I kept thinking about what it would mean to be cut off from my family. No more holiday gatherings, no relationship with my parents as they aged, possibly losing contact with extended family members who might side with my parents. The thought was devastating, even though part of me recognized the toxic patterns in our relationship. In the morning, exhausted but thinking more clearly, I researched financial counseling services that might help Megan. I found several reputable credit counseling agencies that could help her negotiate with creditors and develop a payment plan. I looked into bankruptcy options, which would be painful, but might give her a fresh start without decimating my savings. I even considered whether I could offer a smaller amount, perhaps $10,000, along with help creating a budget and finding stable employment. I created a pros and cons list about paying the debt. The pros were short, maintain family relationships, and help Megan out of crisis. The cons list was much longer: enable irresponsible behavior, sacrifice my financial security, set precedent for future bailouts, reinforce unhealthy family dynamics, delay my own goals and plans, no guarantee Megan will change habits, and possible resentment and damage to sister relationship anyway. As I reflected on these options, I realized something important. This wasn't just about money. This was about decades of family dynamics where I was expected to be the responsible one, while Megan faced no consequences for her choices. This was about my parents using the threat of withdrawal, of love and family connection to control my behavior. This was about whether I valued myself enough to stand up to this manipulation, even at great emotional cost. I thought about all the times I had given in before, all the smaller sacrifices and accommodations. Had they ever actually helped Megan grow into a more responsible adult? Had they improved our family relationships? The answer was clear: no. In fact, each time I acquiesced, the expectations only grew, and Megan only became more entitled. That was the moment I made my decision. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but looking back now, I can see it was also the moment I truly began to value myself. 3 days after the shocking dinner, I texted my parents asking to meet again to discuss my decision regarding Megan's debt. My mother immediately replied, "Come for dinner tomorrow at 6. We knew you'd do the right thing." Her assumption that I would comply with their demand only strengthened my resolve. I spent that day preparing mentally for what would likely be a difficult confrontation. I wrote down key points I wanted to make, knowing that in the moment, emotions might make it hard to express myself clearly. I practiced what I would say with Taylor, who offered to wait nearby in case I needed support afterward. I even meditated that morning, trying to center myself for what was to come. When I arrived at my parents' house the following evening, the first thing I noticed was Megan's new designer purse sitting on the entryway table, a luxury brand that typically sells nothing under $500. Something inside me hardened at the sight of it. The family was gathered in the living room rather than the dining room, suggesting this was viewed as a business meeting rather than a family dinner. My father sat in his favorite leather armchair, looking authoritative in a button-down shirt despite being at home. My mother perched on the sofa next to Megan, who was scrolling through her phone, until my father cleared his throat pointedly when I entered. "Daisy, good you're here," my father began without preamble. "We should discuss how you'll structure the payments. I think a lump sum would be best to clear the high-interest debt immediately, but if you need to do installments for some portion, we can work with that." His presumption that I had already agreed to their demand was stunning, though perhaps it shouldn't have been. Throughout my life, my compliance had been taken for granted. Not today. I took a deep breath and sat down in the remaining armchair, back straight, hands folded in my lap to stop them from trembling. "I've given this a lot of thought." I began, proud that my voice sounded steady despite my racing heart. "I love you all, and I care about what happens to our family. But I've made my decision, and I need you to hear me out completely before responding." My father frowned at my tone, but nodded for me to continue. My mother looked concerned, likely sensing that this wasn't going the way they had planned. "I will not be paying Megan's $45,000 debt," I stated clearly, maintaining eye contact with each family member in turn. "This isn't a decision I've made lightly, and it doesn't mean I don't care about Megan or this family. But I believe paying this debt would actually harm both Megan and our family dynamics in the long run." Before anyone could interrupt, I continued. "What I am willing to offer is this. I've researched several excellent financial counseling services that can help Megan negotiate with creditors and develop a payment plan. I'm willing to accompany her to appointments and help her create a realistic budget. I can use my professional network to help her find a stable job with growth potential. And I'm willing to provide emotional support throughout this process." "That's not what we asked for," my father interjected, his face reddening. "We need a financial solution, not advice." "Dad, the money wouldn't solve the real problem," I replied. "Megan needs to learn financial responsibility, and that won't happen if she's bailed out with no consequences again." My mother's eyes welled with tears, her go-to response when things weren't going her way. "How can you be so cold? This is your sister. We raised you to care about family above everything." "I do care," I insisted. That's why I'm offering help that will actually make a difference long term instead of a temporary fix that enables harmful patterns. Megan, who had been surprisingly quiet, suddenly erupted. Are you serious right now? You're going to sit there in your perfect life with your perfect job and perfect condo and lecture me about responsibility. You've always thought you were better than me. You're just being selfish. This isn't about being better than you, Megan, I said, trying to keep my voice gentle despite her attack. This is about making choices and facing consequences. You made choices that led to this debt, and facing the consequences of those choices with support will help you grow. My father stood up, then his lawyer persona fully activated. Let me be perfectly clear, Daisy. If you refuse to help your sister in this time of need, you are choosing to separate yourself from this family. No more holidays, no more Sunday dinners, no more family vacations. Is that really what you want? The ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and threatening. This was the moment of truth. My heart pounded so hard. I could feel it in my throat, but I stood my ground. What I want is a family that doesn't use love and connection as weapons of control, I said quietly. What I want is a sister who takes responsibility for her actions and parents who don't play favorites. What I want is mutual respect. If standing up for those values means being cut off, then that's a painful consequence I'll have to accept. My mother was openly crying now. You can't mean that. We're your family. Yes, you are. I agreed, my own eyes filling with tears. And I love you all. But I won't be manipulated or guilted into financial decisions that aren't right for anyone involved. My offer of non-financial help stands. Get out, my father said, his voice cold and final. Until you're ready to be a real member of this family and do what's needed, you're not welcome here. Megan wouldn't even look at me, her face a mask of anger and entitlement. My mother reached for my hand as I stood, but my father gave her a sharp look, and she withdrew it. I walked out with as much dignity as I could muster, though inside I was shattering. As I closed the front door behind me, I heard my mother call my name, but I continued to my car. Once inside, I broke down completely, gasping for breath through sobs, experiencing what I later recognized as a panic attack. Yet beneath the pain was a strange sense of relief, like I'd finally put down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for years. As I sat there trying to regulate my breathing, my phone lit up with text messages from my parents. You're making a huge mistake. We're very disappointed in you. Hope your pride keeps you warm at night. Each one was a twist of the knife, but also a confirmation that I'd made the right decision. This wasn't love, it was control. The drive home was both the longest and most liberating of my life. I felt simultaneously devastated and freed, like I was mourning a death, while also being born into a new life where I could finally breathe. The first week after being cut off from my family was the hardest. I went through waves of doubt, grief, anger, and relief, sometimes all within the same hour. I kept reaching for my phone to text my mom about something trivial, only to remember our situation and feel the loss all over again. My support network proved invaluable during this time. Taylor checked on me daily sometimes, just sitting with me in silence when words failed. My coworker Jasmine, who had gone through something similar with her own family, brought me homemade meals and practical advice about establishing boundaries. Even my normally reserved neighbor Mark noticed my distress and started inviting me for coffee on our shared building rooftop, a small kindness that meant more than he knew. About 10 days after the confrontation, I received an unexpected phone call from my Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother. We had always been cordial, but never particularly close, so I was surprised to see his name on my caller ID. Daisy, he said when I answered. I heard about what happened with James and Catherine. I wanted to check on you and maybe provide some context that might help. Uncle Robert proceeded to share family history I'd never known. Apparently, my father had done something similar to his own siblings years ago. When my grandfather died, there was an inheritance dispute where my father, as executor, had pressured his siblings to accept less than their fair share. When Uncle Robert refused, he was temporarily ostracized from the family. Your father eventually came around, but it took 2 years, Uncle Robert explained. These patterns run deep in our family, Daisy. What you're experiencing isn't new, but it doesn't make it right. I just want you to know you're not alone in this, and standing your ground doesn't make you a bad person or a bad daughter." That conversation was incredibly validating and helped me see that this situation was larger than just me, part of generational patterns I had the opportunity to break. At work, my performance inevitably suffered in those first weeks. I made small errors in reports and had trouble concentrating in meetings. Eventually, my boss Sarah called me into her office, and I feared I was about to be reprimanded. Instead, she asked with genuine concern what was going on. I gave her a brief overview of the family situation, trying to remain professional despite the emotional subject matter. To my surprise, she shared that she'd gone through something similar with her brother years earlier. "Take the time you need to process this," she advised. "Just be transparent with me about deadlines you might miss, and we'll work around it. This kind of family trauma doesn't resolve overnight." With Sarah's encouragement, I started seeing a therapist specializing in family dynamics. Dr. Chen helped me recognize the unhealthy patterns I'd normalized throughout my life and begin the process of establishing healthier boundaries. She introduced me to concepts like emotional blackmail and family systems theory that helped me understand what had happened from a more objective perspective. As Thanksgiving approached, the reality of being cut off from my family hit harder. This would be my first major holiday alone. When Taylor invited me to join her family's celebration, I initially hesitated, not wanting to intrude. But she insisted, and I'm grateful she did. Taylor's family welcomed me warmly, making space for me at their table, without making me feel like a charity case. Her mother squeezed my hand when she thought no one was looking and whispered, "Family is who treats you like family, remember that." That same day, my social media feeds filled with photos from my parents' Thanksgiving gathering. There was Megan smiling beside my mother. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins gathered around our family's traditional turkey. I wasn't mentioned or acknowledged, as if I had never existed. That hurt more than I expected, and I found myself crying in Taylor's guest bathroom before pulling myself together to rejoin the celebration. Megan continued posting cryptic comments on social media that seemed directed at me. "Some people just don't understand what family means," and "so grateful for parents who always have my back no matter what." Reading between the lines, I got the impression her financial situation hadn't improved, but I resisted the urge to reach out, knowing it would likely be used against me. A week before Christmas, an anonymous gift basket was delivered to my condo. It contained several of my favorite treats and a small ornament I recognized from my childhood. There was no note, but I suspected it came from my mother, perhaps a small olive branch she wasn't ready to openly extend. I chose to see it as a positive sign rather than overthink it. Christmas morning was difficult. I woke up alone in my condo, no family gathering to attend, no presents to exchange. But I had prepared for this, creating new traditions for myself. I made a special breakfast, took a long walk in the fresh snow, and video called friends throughout the day. I had carefully decorated my small space, bought myself a few wrapped gifts, and made a donation to a financial literacy nonprofit in Megan's name, a gesture she'd likely never know about. That afternoon, I received a surprising email from my younger cousin Abby, my mother's niece. "I heard what happened with Aunt Catherine and Uncle James," she wrote. "I just want you to know that not everyone in the family agrees with how they're handling this. You were always so kind to me growing up, and I miss seeing you. Maybe we could get coffee sometime after the holidays." This message was a small beacon of hope, suggesting that perhaps not all family ties were severed. I responded warmly, and we made plans for January. As the weeks passed, I learned through the family grapevine that my parents were telling a significantly altered version of events. According to them, I had abandoned the family in their time of need because I was selfish and too focused on money. This stung, but Dr. Chen helped me see that I couldn't control others' narratives, only how I responded to them. Despite the heartbreak of family estrangement, I found myself growing stronger and more determined. I channeled my energy into my career, earning recognition for a market analysis project that caught the attention of senior leadership. I expanded my social circle, joining a book club and a hiking group, where I met people who knew me only as I was now, not as the compliant daughter I had been. By the 3-month mark, I had settled into a new normal. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had become more manageable. I still had moments of doubt and sadness, but I no longer questioned whether I had made the right decision. I was sleeping better, standing straighter, and speaking more confidently. The price had been high, but I was finally living authentically. Just when I thought I had adjusted to my new family-free reality, an unexpected visitor showed up at my door. It was a Saturday morning in early spring, about 4 months after the confrontation. I was still in my pajamas, coffee in hand, when my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Megan standing there, looking nothing like the polished, carefree persona she maintained on social media. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her face was makeup-free, and she wore a plain sweatshirt that had seen better days. What struck me most was her expression, a vulnerability I hadn't seen from her since we were very young children. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly, none of the usual bravado in her voice. Stunned, I stepped aside to let her enter my condo. She stood awkwardly in my living room, taking in the space she'd never visited before, despite my multiple invitations since I'd moved in. "Nice place," she said, then immediately burst into tears. I guided her to the couch and waited while she collected herself, offering tissues and water, but not pressing for explanations. Eventually, she took a deep breath and looked up at me. "Mom and Dad couldn't fix it," she said simply. "They tried, but there was just too much debt. They put some money toward it, but it wasn't enough, and now they're fighting about their own finances because of it." She explained that after I refused to pay, my parents had scrambled to help her, emptying a portion of their own savings that they'd apparently been exaggerating about not having access to. But they could only come up with about $20,000 less than half of what she needed. "I lost my apartment last month," she continued, "and the bank repossessed my car last week. I've been staying on Mom and Dad's couch, but Dad keeps making comments about how I need to figure things out, and Mom cries every time she looks at me. It's not good." The news of her situation didn't bring me any satisfaction, just a dull sadness for everyone involved. "I'm sorry you're going through that," I said, meaning it. "What are you thinking about doing next?" What followed was the most honest conversation Megan and I had ever had. For the first time, she admitted that her financial habits were out of control, that she used shopping and luxury experiences to fill some empty place inside her to maintain the image she thought she needed to project. She confessed to lying to our parents about the extent of her debt until it was too overwhelming to hide anymore. "I always thought someone would save me," she said, her voice small. "It was always like that. You know I messed up and you or Mom or Dad would fix it. I never had to deal with consequences before." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral despite the vindication I felt hearing her acknowledge this pattern. "And now," I asked. "Now I'm screwed," she said bluntly. "And I don't know how to fix it. I came here because, well, you've always been good with money and responsibility and all that. And I thought maybe, I don't know what I thought." Despite years of resentment and the recent pain of being cut off by my family, I felt a surge of compassion for my sister. Not enough to empty my bank account for her, but enough to offer the help I had originally proposed. "I can't pay your debt, Megan," I said clearly, but I meant what I said before. "I can help you create a plan to deal with it yourself. I can help you find resources, learn to budget, maybe find a more stable job, but you'd have to be willing to do the hard work." Her initial resistance was evident in her expression, a flash of the entitlement I knew so well. But then something shifted, and she nodded slowly. "I don't have any other options left," she admitted. "And maybe it's time I grew up a little." Over the next few hours, I helped Megan create an inventory of her debts, from highest interest rate to lowest. Using my financial background, I explained how debt consolidation might help with some of it, and how she could negotiate with creditors directly for the rest. I used my professional connections to get her an appointment with a nonprofit credit counseling service that had helped several of my clients. For housing, I helped her find a room rental in a shared apartment that would cost a third of what she'd been paying for her luxury one-bedroom. For transportation, I suggested public transit for now, with the possibility of an inexpensive used car once she had stabilized her finances. When she mentioned needing work clothes for job interviews, I offered to loan her some of mine rather than shopping for new ones. The most significant moment came when I used my industry contacts to get Megan an interview for an administrative assistant position at a financial services firm, where a former colleague now worked. It wasn't glamorous, but it offered stability benefits and potential for growth if she proved herself reliable. "Why are you helping me after everything that happened?" Megan asked as she was preparing to leave. "Mom and Dad basically disowned you because of me." "Because you're still my sister," I replied simply. "And because maybe we've both been stuck in roles that weren't serving either of us. You as the irresponsible one, who needs saving, me as the responsible one, who always sacrifices. Maybe we can find a healthier way to be sisters." The following week brought an angry phone call from my father. He'd learned that Megan was interviewing for a job I'd helped her find, and had seen the credit counseling pamphlets in her bag. He accused me of interfering and undermining their parental authority. "She came to me for help, Dad," I explained calmly. "I'm offering her the kind of help that will actually make a difference long term. Isn't that what matters?" "What matters is family loyalty," he retorted, "which you've made very clear isn't a priority for you." "That's not fair," I responded, my voice firm, despite the old instinct to placate him. "I'm being loyal to Megan by helping her become independent rather than dependent. And I was loyal to this family by refusing to participate in unhealthy patterns anymore." The conversation ended badly with my father hanging up on me. But something unexpected happened the next day. Megan called to tell me that she had defended me to our parents for the first time ever. "I told them you were actually helping me more than their money would have," she said, sounding surprised at her own actions. "Dad got really mad, but I stood my ground. It felt weird, but kind of good." Over the next few months, Megan and I developed a new kind of relationship. It was rocky at times, as old patterns don't disappear overnight. She would occasionally slip into expecting me to solve her problems or bail her out financially, and I would sometimes fall into lecturing or judging her choices. But we were both trying, and that meant something. Megan got the administrative job, and to everyone's surprise, including perhaps her own, excelled at it. She had always been personable and charismatic skills that served her well in an office environment. Her boss praised her phone manner and client interactions, and she found satisfaction in mastering new software systems and office procedures. 2 months after starting her job, Megan invited our parents and me to dinner at her new apartment, a small but nice room in a shared house with 3 roommates. It was the first time we would all be together since the confrontation. I arrived with significant anxiety, unsure of what to expect. The tension was palpable as we sat in Megan's small living room, my parents barely acknowledging me. But then Megan did something remarkable. She stood up and formally announced that she had paid off one credit card completely and had arranged payment plans for all her remaining debt. She had stuck to her budget for 2 consecutive months and had even started a small emergency fund. "I wanted you all to know that I'm taking responsibility for my finances," she said clearly. "And I couldn't have done it without Daisy's help, not with money, but with guidance and support. I'm learning that's actually more valuable in the long run." My parents' reaction was mixed. My mother seemed genuinely pleased with Megan's progress, though she avoided giving me any credit for it. My father remained cold toward me, but did ask a few questions about Megan's debt consolidation strategy, grudgingly directing one question to me about the interest rates she'd negotiated. It wasn't a full reconciliation by any means, but it was a small crack in the ice. As I was leaving, my father didn't hug me goodbye, but did give a curt nod, which from him was significant. My mother squeezed my hand quickly when my father wasn't looking, and whispered, "Maybe we can get coffee next week." That evening, I realized that while my parents might never fully change my relationship with my sister, had the potential to evolve into something healthier for both of us. For the first time, I saw her not as my spoiled younger sister, or as a burden, but as a young woman finding her way just as I was. It's been a little over a year since that fateful family dinner, when my parents threatened to cut me off if I didn't pay my sister's debt. Looking back now from a place of greater healing and perspective, I can see how that ultimatum, painful as it was, ultimately led to positive changes for everyone involved. Professionally, I've thrived in ways I might not have if I'd remained in those old family dynamics. the confidence I gained from standing my ground translated to more assertiveness at work. 6 months ago, I received another promotion, this time to team lead with 5 analysts reporting to me. Last month, I was recognized with an industry award for a market analysis project that's now being used as a case study by our entire firm. Megan's journey has been remarkable to witness. She paid off all her high-interest debt within 8 months through diligent budgeting and picking up occasional weekend work. She's still on payment plans for some of the larger debts, but she hasn't missed a payment. More importantly, she's developed healthy financial habits that will serve her throughout her life. After 6 months as an administrative assistant, she was promoted to Client Services Associate, a role that better utilizes her natural social skills. She recently moved to a nicer apartment with just one roommate, a place she can comfortably afford on her new salary. Last week, she proudly showed me the small but growing investment account she had opened, something I never would have imagined her doing a year ago. My relationship with my parents has evolved into something I describe as limited but civil. We don't have the close connection I once craved, but we're not completely estranged either. We see each other at major family events and occasional dinners, usually with Megan present as a buffer. My mother has made more efforts to reconnect than my father. She started with small gestures, texts about trivial matters, questions about my work. Eventually, we established a monthly lunch tradition, just the two of us. During these lunches, we carefully avoid certain topics, but we found ways to enjoy each other's company within these boundaries. She's never explicitly acknowledged or apologized for the ultimatum, but there's an unspoken understanding that the old methods of control are no longer effective. My father has been slower to warm. His pride makes it difficult for him to admit he was wrong, or that his approach to family relationships might be flawed. But even he has shown subtle signs of change. He asked for my professional opinion on his retirement investments, a significant acknowledgement of my expertise. At the last family gathering, he mentioned a client who was looking for financial advice and suggested they might contact me, a small but meaningful vote of confidence. Uncle Robert has become a more significant presence in my life, offering the kind of paternal guidance and support I sometimes miss from my father. He's helped me understand the generational patterns in our family and provided insight into my father's behavior based on how their own father treated them. This context doesn't excuse the manipulation, but it helps me view it with more compassion and less personal hurt. Through therapy, I've gained invaluable insights about setting boundaries without building walls. Dr. Chen helped me recognize that I can limit my parents' ability to hurt me without cutting them off completely, that I can love my family while still protecting myself from toxic dynamics. These lessons have improved not just my family relationships, but all my interactions. I've built what I now think of as my chosen family, a network of friends and colleagues who support me unconditionally. Taylor remains my closest friend, the sister of my heart. My neighbor Mark eventually became more than a friend, and we've been dating for 6 months now. He's met my family and understands the complicated dynamics without judgment. Megan and I have developed a relationship I never thought possible. We still have our moments of falling into old patterns, but we're quick to recognize and correct them now. We've discovered shared interests we never explored before, like hiking and documentary films. Last month, she asked me to help her apply for a certification program that would advance her career, and I felt only pride in her ambition, not the resentment such requests once triggered. During a recent family birthday dinner for my mother, I watched the subtle tensions and alliances shift around the table, the progress and the remaining challenges evident in every interaction. Megan, now confident in her growing financial stability, raised her glass in a toast. "I want to thank my sister," she said, making direct eye contact with me. "A year ago, I thought I needed someone to rescue me from my problems. Daisy had the courage to show me I could rescue myself with the right support. I'm a better person because you stood your ground." My parents looked uncomfortable but didn't contradict her. My father cleared his throat and added gruffly, "You've both shown determination this past year." Coming from him, it was practically a standing ovation. As I reflect on this journey, I've realized that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is not to solve their problems, but to believe in their ability to solve their own. I've learned that true support means offering guidance while allowing people to experience the natural consequences of their choices. I've discovered that boundaries aren't walls meant to keep people out, but rather frameworks that allow relationships to flourish in healthier ways. Standing your ground doesn't always lead to losing relationships. Sometimes it transforms them into something more authentic and mutually respectful. The pain of that ultimatum led to growth none of us could have anticipated. In calling my parents bluff, I found my voice. Megan found her strength, and our family found a more honest, if imperfect, way to be together. If you've ever faced a similar situation with family expectations or financial pressure, I hope my story gives you courage. Sometimes the hardest choice is the one that leads to the most growth. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that ultimately improved a relationship? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real stories about family dynamics and personal growth. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set a boundary with those you love.